Craig Onan is the name of a man who hosts a podcast called Uncharted Catholic Man. Uncharted Catholic Man gives a real-world focus of living a Catholic marriage and trying to live the Catholic faith in light of some of the struggles that a Catholic married couple may go through. And those struggles they're not listed specifically, but they are mentioned in Humanae Vitae. This is one of the powerful things that we do here on the podcast is talk about the real world, and this is about as real world as you're going to get. Also, understand that my ministry is not to teach you what people say the Catholic faith teaches, but what the Catholic faith actually teaches. And I do that as well, and that means bringing the Catholic faith into the real world. It's called pastoral ministry. That's what I do. And on this episode, we are going to sit down and talk with Craig Onan about his ministry, which is outside of his job. Whatever he does for regular employment, this is a hobby, in a sense. Maybe not a hobby. This is a ministry. That's the right word I was looking for. That he does, as he tells us at the end of this broadcast, around 5 o'clock on Wednesday mornings. Well, let's switch over to our interview with Craig Onan of Uncharted Catholic Man. Please note that we will be discussing mature topics, so if you happen to have children in the car, maybe while you're listening, or in the room, you might want to maybe refer and listen to this podcast at another time or with a set of headphones. Anyway, let's switch right over now to our interview with Craig Onan of Uncharted Catholic Man. Okay, so why don't we begin with my question I always begin. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you, Father, for having me. My name is Craig. I don't use my real name on social media and stuff, but that's the name I go by for the podcasting and different stuff that I do online. So I'm a middle-aged man, married. I've been married 23 years. We have 9 kids. Our oldest is 22. Our youngest is 3. We're finally not changing diapers for the first time in a long, long time.
Wow.
So happily married, but have encountered a lot of difficulties along the way. And one thing I will say beforehand is I'm a cradle Catholic, although we weren't very serious Catholics when I was younger. My parents kind of went through a conversion, and we became kind of more and more conservative, ultimately becoming traditionalist in my teenage years. And then I actually went to the seminary and spent 3 years in college seminary, where I met my soon-to-be future wife, and left the seminary, and we got married. And that's kind of, I guess that's a short version of where we are now.
All right, very good. And in light of this, one of my ministries, as you know, is I'm interested in helping people understand what the church actually says and dealing with people in the real world, and not having people understand that there is 2 kinds of Catholics: the ones who live the actual perfect ideal way of life, and everyone else who is all going to hell, right? That stuff has got to go. So you really, on Uncharted Catholic Man, really talk about living the real world. Yeah,
and when I started, well, I guess I was sort of the initial person to start it. At that point, I had been married about 20-some years. And one other thing I should add, too, is back when I was in college, sort of, I don't even think it's coincidental anymore, but I was writing senior papers on Humanae Vitae.
Wow.
Really, I was reading Christopher West back then, and I was all excited. Although, strangely enough, when I was doing the paper, I stumbled upon some writings of, I think it's a theologian named Bernard Lonergan. I think he's from your neck of the woods.
Yes.
And he wrote some critiques of Humanae Vitae that I found very interesting and not easy to dismiss. And that was sort of maybe the seed got planted there. But basically, I went into marriage and I was like, okay, there was no question that we weren't going to be using contraception, and we were going to probably use NFP and all that, and expected it to be not easy, but I was in no way prepared for that kind of the constant struggle that it presented to us, especially to me. Now it affects my wife and me differently, I guess. But I just was completely unprepared for how actually difficult it is constantly. And after about 20 years of that, I kind of went out searching for some answers, because for so long I thought, well, I just need to like fix some things myself. And I can be that perfect Catholic that you kind of mentioned before, that follows all the rules without really too much difficulty. And I started realizing that I don't know that I'm ever going to get to that point. Maybe this is what it is to some degree. And I had to try to come to grips with that a little bit. And so I went out searching for other people like me, and I found none. And I realized, well, I can't be the only one. And that's how I stumbled upon Jonah. Jonah and I had been friends for a little while. Our kids went to, we go to church together, and we would go hunting and fishing together. And somehow we got talking one day about this stuff, and we realized that we had very, very similar experiences, and we're like, we can't be the only ones. And that was sort of that was sort of what planted the seed to us eventually starting the podcast.
And that's what your podcast is really all about, is you're not the only ones. And you started the podcast, and now people are coming out and saying, yeah, this is me too. And this is, I was fascinated the other day. It's tragic in a sense, and I was talking to someone about it the other day. This is fascinating because as a priest, obviously I don't deal with this that much. But I work in hospital ministry now, and I deal with very real issues. I deal with people who will say, well, Father, I haven't been to church in a long time. And I'll go, I've never heard that before.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And they'll all laugh and stuff. But there was someone who's new on the channel, and he's about to lose his house. And I was like, he was talking about how he's got 3 children. He's trying to do the best he can. And there's a lot of fear in NFP and a lot of fear in this. Can we deal with this and stuff? And he's about to lose his house. And these are stories that I'd never hear.
Well, and I think that's because I don't know if it's a mixture of embarrassment. I think we can start to think we're the only ones that are having this. Everyone else is fine. You listen to the Christopher West of the world, and it looks like it's all, not that it's easy, but it seems like it's kind of a manageable problem. And no one really talks about this kind of stuff. And so I think, and if you venture onto forums, whether it's Facebook groups or Reddit, we have kind of a running, kind of a joke in the Discord that, if you say something even slightly out of bounds on, a Catholic, quote unquote Catholic Reddit sub community or whatever, you immediately get blocked, or the comments are taken down. Like, dialogue is not allowed. And that was one of the things that was really, really important to us, was to allow people to speak freely and talk about some things that are vulnerable and embarrassing, both from a practical level, such as losing your house, but also on a moral level with some of the common things that we struggle with, especially men, that I'm sure you hear all the time in the confessional.
And it's interesting because you'll hear people will talk about, this is the way you have to live, and you're supposed to do this, and this document said this, and this document. And you can find documents that will say things like that, but that's not the entire document, number one. And that's not what the church teaches. The church understands that this whole idea that, everyone else in the church is doing this perfectly except me, does not exist. And but it comes across that way in many ways. And that's the reason why we have the confessional. It's not there to prevent you from going to hell. It's there to help people live their Catholic faith who are human.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest challenges in this area is, unlike struggles that people might have, let's say in their prayer life, or how generous you are with the poor, or maybe you struggle with eating. Most of the other, let's say, virtues we struggle with or vices that we struggle with, it's not obvious that it's some grave matter right away. Like, yes, we've fallen short, but it's falling short is just that, falling short. Whereas when you get into the realm of sexual morality, everything that's outside the line is immediately grave matter, essentially. And that's I think what people struggle with is, if I step outside the line a little bit, it's grave matter and potentially mortal sin if you have knowledge and consent. And I think people that I think they're just, it feels like you're on this you're up on this high skyscraper with no guard, nothing, no protective netting around you. I think that's the hardest part about these kinds of struggles, is any of the things that people commonly struggle with or resort to, if you will, to try to manage the difficult times, is, depending on who you listen to, well, that's grave matter. That's a serious sin. Go to the confession. And maybe that is the answer, and sometimes it is, but I think that is that really stifles people being honest and vulnerable and finding a way to get through things, because they'll say, well, let's say you're struggling with a particular sexual sin. You can't say, well, if you're doing it every day, cut it back to every other day or every 3 days, like things like you might do with someone that's struggling with food or alcohol or other normal things. There is no, like, you can, there's no room for that, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's why a lot of people struggle, and when they get into these things, they really can't get themselves out, because there's no room to struggle. You're either perfect, or you are in really difficult shape morally, and then you bring guilt into the marriage. And then what happens is, a lot of times, if it's just one spouse struggling, usually the guy is struggling on a moral level with these things, is he's feeling guilty. And then he is, depending on how he reacts to that, becomes, can have very bad feelings for his wife, because in some ways you're the reason I'm in this situation. My soul's in jeopardy because of X, Y, and Z. And that, I just see it happening over and over and over again in marriages. And there just isn't a place where people can talk about these things out in the open without risk of being, scolded, judged, blocked, whatever the case may be.
One of the things I was discussing on the channel the other day is St. John Vianney described, if it's not the worst sin, it's close to it. It's detraction. Mm-hmm. And I'm fascinated by some of these online apologists who traffic in detraction every day.
Yeah,
all in the name of what they, this great. And it's like, you guys, this is not what the saints teach.
Right.
And Humanae Vitae makes it clear, and it's right there in there, that Pope Paul VI understood. I mean, there are a lot of people disagree with him and everything else, but Pope Paul VI understood that this, his teaching was going to be a struggle for couples, and he said the church has got to be there with all her tools to help couples through. That's not happening when you've got a priest on the altar saying you are going to hell, and most people here are going to hell.
Yeah, and a lot of times what happens in these situations is, if people fall into one of these categories, it's not usually a quick fix, and a lot of times it's, and so you may be going back to confession over and over again, and then you get to the point where priests may say, I'm not going to give you absolution. You're obviously not remorseful for this, because you're continuing to do the same thing over and over again, and And that's actually one of the reasons I thought that the podcast was so important. And when Joan and I were in our early days, there was no one listening. We were we were just getting together every week recording, and I said priests need to hear this because it's not easy, and isn't necessarily the place for someone to come in to the confessional and say, Father, let me tell you what my marriage state is like when I tell you these sins. Like, you just go in, you tell your sins, and I don't fault priests for not necessarily understanding the context, but this is kind of the context that at least married people are dealing with.
And there is, I mean, this is one of the things that Pope Francis came out with a lot, and the saints would say that too. And there's a great line I heard the other day I'll bring up. That whole idea of, no, I'm not going to give you absolution because first of all, whether you know this or not, a priest is not allowed to say you keep coming here confessing the same sin. I don't know if you knew that.
They're supposed to not remember or keep track.
That's true. Okay. Yeah, that's absolutely true. So he's not supposed to say that at all. But at the same time, that's the reality for some people. They struggle with it, and there's a priest who he's local here. He does campus ministry, and he knows many of the students come to him, and they're going to confess the same sin and the whole bit. And he says, and they'll say. A priest may say to them, not him. A priest may say to them, "Well, you're not sorry for your sins," but he'll say, I take it you're sorry for your sin now. We're not going to worry about later. And that's a great way to say, look, I'm not going to get into this whole thing. Yeah. If I'm wrong, let God deal with me. But in the meantime, that's what we need. And some of these stories that you guys have brought out of, from the altar or in the confessional are just tragic.
Yeah, and it can make. These are very common questions, and I would say it's fairly common for couples at some point in their marriage to reach a point where they're coming to the priest for advice and saying, "Look, we need to not get pregnant. We're finding NFP either difficult or nearly impossible from a practical standpoint, and looking for options, and the priest, I think most priests feel compelled to tell them, well, you need to live like brother and sister. But some priests will give different advice. And so, depending on what kind of advice you get to these same questions, like there's not necessarily uniformity amongst the priest about what to say in those situations. That can make a big difference. And how, these are not just minor issues. Like these have such ripple effects in the marriage because, let's say the husband is struggling. He's falling into sins. Him and his wife are at odds with each other. He's starting to feel depressed. Maybe he's starting to feel despair. The kids can tell when mom and dad are not on the same page. They can tell, and it carries over into the family, and it sets the tone. And kids pick up on that stuff just so, like they always say, kids may never notice the good things you do, but they'll always notice the bad things you do. So if you have a bad day, that kid may remember that for the rest of their life. And that's the thing I think is so important here is you're not just talking about two individuals. You're talking about a family structure, and most of us have larger families. We're not just, and so it creates a dynamic that doesn't just affect the individual or the couple. It does, in fact, I think, affect the kids and then their kids and their kids. And so that's why I think it's so important that we can talk about these things out in the open, and that priests who are hearing confessions and giving advice can understand a little better the context within which people are operating and why people are sincere in their struggles, and they're not just out looking to justify life's a pleasure. Because I'm telling you, when you're parents of kids, you're just trying to get by and have some time together with each other when you can. That's kind of what it looks like in real life.
Yeah, and this is important. This is very important, and it's part of the marriage, and when the priest doesn't understand that, and he's just very black and white, and this means, and you can't do this, or the whole bit, and or even gets upset in the confessional, or just doesn't listen, or whatever. That's a real problem, because that's not his job.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's something that can be changed in seminary. I mean, I was just in college seminary, so I never got to theology school where, you probably really start to learn the stuff. But, I think these are things that if I was a priest, I would definitely want to know and have it, and the other thing I will say is this: it can be difficult to bring these things to your parish priest. All the years that I've struggled, Joan and I always laugh. We have a priest in another town that we're in there all the time for confession, because depending on what you have to go in there for, it's not the funnest thing to talk to your parish priest, even though they shouldn't remember or recognize you or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I, as much as possible, which is like every possible chance I have, with some exceptions because it's not there or whatever, and I'm needed in a parish or whatever, I only hear anonymous confessions. For exactly that reason. I don't need to know who you are. I'm here to listen to, and is it possible I might recognize some voices? Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. I do radio. I mean, obviously. But that's all right. You just and that's an important consideration, because you're right. The priest is there as a servant of God. He's not there as himself. He's there as a servant of God to respond in that way. And if you're coming to the confession to begin with, that's a difficult thing to do. And the priest has got to recognize that. Yeah. Now, one of the things that started, that really got us to do this this podcast, this particular episode, is you did episode 311, 10 things every Catholic couple needs to know. And I said this needs to be sent to the seminaries too, as we were just talking about. But this is important, because here you are, this is real world stuff, right? It's kind of like one of my complaints is you'll have someone who is a grandmother of 10 kids and 12 great grandkids and 7 great grandkids. And yet you have some 25-year-old that just got a PhD from Harvard who's supposed to be the expert on bringing up children. Right. And it's just the same thing. You live it every day. Did you know that the Catholic Audio Media podcast is available on various similar podcast platforms? No, you can find us, among others, who deals with Tourette syndrome, which is our home the people platform. Who have Tourette syndrome can find more about Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeart, among others. There you go. Just look for Catholic Audio Media. You gave a list of 10 things, and some platforms such as Spotify. It's an excellent video. You can find his video channel. Look it up on YouTube at Uncharted, and listen to the Catholic Audio Media podcast. It'll come up. You can also just put the Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Right, Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Well, check us out. When you say is check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at CatholicAudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out, patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media.
Identified 5 categories of ways that people feel love. And the ones are, acts of service, quality time, words of affirmation, gifts, and physical touch. I think I got the 5 right. And what that means is we all, this is especially true in marriages, and a lot of this is kind of lines up with gender a little bit. Most guys have physical touch as a primary love language. And what he says is your love language, whatever it is, you have kind of a love tank. You have a tank, and that becomes depleted, and you need to have that filled up to be kind of operating at your best version of yourself, which is why men predominantly seek physical intimacy with their wives, because that is how they feel loved. And for a lot of women, my wife included, that's not her primary love language. Her primary love language is quality time, me sitting down, listening to her. And it opened my eyes because it explained why my wife and I we had a good marriage, but we had a lot of strife because I felt kind of unfulfilled at point, and she felt unfulfilled because I was trying to do things for her and whatever, but I wasn't stopping to spend time and listen to her. And so even though I was doing things because I loved her, she did not feel loved because it wasn't really how she felt loved. And so then we started to kind of grow distant to each other. And so it was very much part of a lot of our struggles that we had that led to it. So, so the 5 Love Languages book, I think, is one of the best books that I've ever read. I've read it multiple times. And so I encourage people to read, especially if you're not married yet. When I did this episode, one of the people in our group they were getting married in a week. I think both of them are in our group, and asked what I would recommend. It's like, I tell you what, I'll do an episode on this. So that was it's nice to get people that are sort of have an opportunity to learn from a lot of the mistakes that I've made along the way. Yeah. So that's why I really enjoyed that episode. So yeah, 5 Love Languages book, and maybe even priests should read it. I mean, there's nothing really offensive in there, but I think it tells a lot about the differences in people and human nature.
We're going to be back in just a bit. We're going to take a quick break. In the meantime, let me let you know that the book that Craig was talking about is called The 5 Love Languages. It's written by Dr. Gary Chapman. It's from Northfield Publishing, and the release date was June of 2024. I'm looking at a webpage from Thrift Books, which is kind of bookstores independent bookstores that sell, books. But in any case, the 5 Love Languages is available hardcover. They have various prices, but you can find it hardcover, paperback, audio CD, and even leather bound. So, and you can even check what condition you want it in. Yes, Thrift Books. You thought there was only certain bookstores. No, there's Thrift Books. So, and I suppose if you went on Amazon, I don't know, you could see if it has an e-version of it as well. But the name of the book is The 5 Love Languages by Dr. Gary Chapman. In any case, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back on the other side of the break. We're listening to Craig Onan on the Catholic Audio Media Podcast. He is, along with a man named Jonah, the creator and the hosts of a podcast called The Uncharted Catholic Man. You can find it on YouTube and other places as well. Go to youtube.com/@Uncharted Catholic Man. That's all one word, and you'll find it on YouTube. We'll be right back right after this. Are you looking for guidance on how to live a purposeful and transformed life? Look no further than Romans 12, a chapter in the New Testament that offers practical wisdom for believers. Romans 12 begins with a powerful call to offer our bodies as living sacrifices to God, urging us to renew our minds and align them with His will. This chapter highlights the importance of humility, using our gifts for the benefit of others, and exercising genuine love. It teaches us to be diligent in serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, persevering in tribulation, and being devoted to prayer. But it doesn't stop there. Romans 12 also teaches us to live in harmony with others, extending kindness and hospitality even to our enemies. It urges us to overcome evil with good and leave vengeance to God. So if you're seeking guidance on how to live a life of love, humility, and service, dive into Romans 12. Let its practical wisdom transform your life. Romans 12, a chapter that offers a roadmap to living a purposeful and transformed Christian life. Available now in the New Testament. Get your copy today. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Patreon.com/Catholic Audio Media. Check us out. Check what we have to offer. Previews of upcoming podcasts. Previews of upcoming columns over at catholicaudiomedia.substack.com. Your ability to comment, make suggestions, even make suggestions in upcoming programs. Check us out. Patreon.com, Catholic Audio Media. The priests are oftentimes in the seminary taught documents and rules, and and this is what the church teaches, and all that, and that's good, but what I used to say when I was in the seminary, and it's the very nature of my priesthood, but you have to be pastoral. That's our role. Everything was pastoral, and what that is taking the teaching and putting it into a human level. And so this is important because we don't learn that. At least I don't know about today, but we didn't learn that. In light of that, you say, listen to your wife without multitasking or offering solutions. Oh, wow. I mean, that is so classic male.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
It took me I'm still not perfect at it, but it took me a long time to figure that one out. And it's very much related to that love language. And this is something that I don't know if anyone ever told me. Like, my dad never really sat down and kind of told me any of this stuff. All I knew was there's some things you better not do until you're married, and that was kind of it, right? And we did that. We followed those rules, but nothing really prepared us for marriage. And men and women, and that's the other thing I want to say too is within the context of a Catholic marriage, where we have a lot of rules or expectations, whatever you want to call them, that most people don't have. All people have struggles in marriage. So these kinds of dynamics are something everyone deals with. I don't care if you're Catholic or not. You're going to have these growing pains. You're going to have times that you're fighting or you're not connecting. And so Catholics are no different. And then in the midst of that, we're also having to deal with NFP and sins and confession, all that most non-Catholic Christians don't even have to worry about, right? And so it is just a very, very difficult environment, because most of us, no matter how well prepared you are, you don't really know what marriage is like until you get into it. And even then, it takes years and years and years to really start to understand each other and how marriage works.
I grew up in the era, of course I was younger, and I obviously wasn't married, of love is never having to say you're sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is not true.
No, definitely not.
Let me see. Regular date nights and making time for the relationship.
Yeah. That was something that I think, and again, this is, I think, something that's really especially important for Catholic couples. If you are like most, I want to say reasonably good Catholic couples, you're let's say you're not using birth control, or even if you are, you're welcoming children in. And once you start having kids, especially if you start having kids right away, like a lot of us do, we had our first child within the first year we were married, right? So we never really knew a life not being parents or pregnant. And you're newly married, you don't have much money. I was still in school, and the last thing you feel like you can do is hire a babysitter if you can find someone. Good luck trying to find people that'll babysit 6 kids or more.
Oh yeah,
right.
That's right.
Yeah, it's nearly impossible. So you have the logistics plus the expense, and the first thing that mom and dad usually give up is each other, their time for each other. And we fell into that, and most people do. And it really, once we reestablish that, it has made such a huge difference. And so I really, really encourage people to make it find a way. It's just too important. it's almost as important as the electric bill, I think. So you have to do that right away, and you have to keep that going, because you're going to need each other. Life is going to be hard. Raising kids is hard. Paying mortgages, all that is hard. And the one thing you need is a strong foundation between you.
NFP will be challenging.
Yeah, I always like to laugh, and I say I went into marriage thinking marriage was intimacy with occasional abstinence, and it turns out it's kind of the other way around. It's a bunch of abstinence with occasional intimacy. Now, that's probably a bit of an exaggeration, but yeah, NFP is hard for a lot of reasons. For guys, it's hard because we hate abstinence, and for us Catholic guys, that's when we are sort of at risk of falling into sins. Incidentally, one of the things that one of the first breakthroughs that Joan and I had early on, we haven't used this term in a long time, but we call it PMAS, post-marital act syndrome. And we started sharing that, and we realized that pretty much every married guy went through the same thing because of just the biology of men and how the marital act happens. You get this kind of this release, we call it this bliss period for a day or so afterwards, and then the body starts doing what the body does, and you start building up tension, and it gets worse and worse and worse. And it for most guys, it's a 3 to 5 day period, and then you're starting to like really feel squeamish. Well, if you're using NFP, you're having at least 10 to 14 days or more of abstinence. It's not a week. I don't care whatever the brochures say. It's not a week, unless you're, not very fertile. Like we're very fertile, so we don't follow the rules to a T. We get pregnant. So that's very hard for men. Not just the abstinence, but that's where it becomes really hard to be a Catholic man, because now you are there are other outlets. There's ways to take care of it, but they all involve a trip to the confessional, right? And so that's typically what the guy struggles with. And then for the women, like my wife, we've gotten pregnant when we weren't really trying to get pregnant, because it had been a while or whatever. And so pregnancy and constantly being pregnant, constantly taking care of little kids is a huge burden on women, especially when you can't trust NFP, or you can't trust yourself to follow NFP, or your body is not super regular. It can be a really, really scary thing for women to do NFP, because now you don't even have confidence in it. And then you and your husband is trying to kind of grit it out and kind of save himself for when you can be together. And she's like, I don't want to get pregnant again. And it is just, it's hard for different reasons typically for husbandhood, but it's hard. And you put that together, and it is very, very difficult. It just causes just a lot of strain on marriages.
And, just so you're talking about the, you don't want to get pregnant again because you got a lot of, maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a lot of fear of what are we going to do financially and, practically and everything else if we have another child.
Yeah. And we've been lucky, especially as we've gotten older, pregnancies have gotten more difficult, but we've never experienced miscarriages or severe, we've never been rich, but we've never been impoverished either. But a lot of people are. I have a pretty good job, and we've been able to do it. But a lot of people in our situation, I don't think would be, especially if you had health issues, or you had, if mom was bedridden for extended periods of time during pregnancy. That it's a real concern.
Wow. Well, and in light of that, you see that, again, these are the practical issues. These are the real issues and to kind of dismiss it, well, that's just what you're supposed to do, which happens, preached from the altar, preached in the confessional, just that's the way it is. It doesn't do anyone any good.
No, I think most couples, are sincere when they're like, we need a break. I think the risk of couples, let's say, abusing something like NFP or whatever, I just think is so very slim because, most of us, we're just trying to do our best. We want to do the very best for our kids. We want our kids to have a better life than we do. We want them to go to Catholic school. I mean, Catholic schools are expensive. You want to do all these things. It's a real demand, and we don't live in the, let's say the 1940s and 1950s where you had grandma and grandpa and aunts and uncles close by. Most of us don't have that, and that could be a huge difference. Make a huge difference in what it's like to have a large family. And
I know there were stories. If I'm not wrong, I could be wrong here. So, some of the famous celebrities from the 50s and 60s, of course, they grew up in the teens and all the way up. Their families would be so big that they would actually give away their children to relatives. And, obviously that happened not to celebrities too, but that's what they'd say. And, we'd never think of doing that today, but you've got that whole, that practical level that isn't often addressed.
Yeah. I don't want to come in here and pick on the trads, but that's part of what I do. I like to pick on trads a little bit because I'm a former trad. I consider myself a recovering trad. It's very easy to romanticize how things used to be and to see, overlook the realities of what people went through in the past. And hey, back then, people just had kids and they found a way. Yeah, they found a way by giving away their kids, or
that's right. They did.
You probably would never survive in the life that those people put up with. And maybe it's just even you've got 4 kids. My dad is one of 15. He talks about being 3 or 4 boys together in one bed in a
That's right.
farmhouse bedroom that didn't have any heat, right? I guess you survive. I mean, humans are very resilient, but that doesn't mean that's just what you do.
Yeah, no, that's true. Let me see. One, pray for your spouse's happiness and holiness daily, especially during tough times. I love that. You know how much I'm very much into prayer. Prayer is essential. The whole bit. Is this something you've done your whole marriage?
Probably not more than like the last 7 or 8 years. It got so difficult at one point. I was sneaking out of the house to go to therapy, actually, a Catholic therapist. And have you ever read the book or seen the movie? I think it's Fireproof. I think Kirk Cameron.
I know of it. Yeah,
it's a lot. Yeah. It's a lot along the. It's very similar to that. My wife and I, we've always been Catholic. We've always taken our kids to mass. We pray together as a family pretty regularly. But I didn't always pray for her, and it's really hard to pray for someone when you kind of hate their guts in the moment, or feel like they hate your guts. And there will be times in your marriage when you will feel that way. And that was one thing that really helped me in those moments is even though I feel really hurt and I feel unloved, she's still my wife, and above all things, I want her to be happy and I want her to be holy, and to have that sincere disposition to pray for them every day, even when you feel like you are being wronged, is so important. And it really helped me get over, because a lot of what happened to me in the midst of these struggles is I had this revolving bit of resentment, sometimes to me, sometimes at God, sometimes at my wife, and that really helped me not to be as I'm not saying I was perfect, but it helped me to be less resentful to her, because I sincerely always did want her to be happy, her to be holy. And I think I'm sure the prayers help, but I think more than anything else, it helped me to reorient myself towards doing my best for her, even when it doesn't always feel like it's being reciprocated.
And I wonder if some of that was how you felt and not necessarily what she was thinking.
Oh yeah, that's the problem. A lot of times you run around, you're hurt to death, and your spouse has no idea. Certainly didn't mean to hurt you. The human heart is very sensitive, and in some ways, it's more sensitive when you get slighted or something by the person you love more than anyone else in the world. A short word or something like that, a cut down, in some ways feels worse when it's like you kind of think that marriage, like, this is the place where I can be me, and or even on my bad days, I have someone there that's got my back, and it doesn't always work that way in practice,
Wow. Maybe we'll do one more. Let me see. I saw it right here. Wait a minute. Where'd it go? Oh, patience and communication are key to a successful marriage.
Yeah. And that probably is a little bit cliche, but it is. You would think, like, a lot of the stuff that Joan and I started talking about, I couldn't talk to my wife about. And you would think that someone you have, the most intimate type relationship within anyone in the world, you would be able to talk about things. And it's oftentimes not the case. In many ways, it's much easier to be physically intimate than to be intimate in communication, and to share your feelings and be vulnerable. And so being patient with each other and recognize and try to, this is, I think, something that people really struggle with, is to give your spouse, if anyone should get the benefit of the doubt, like if someone says something, you're like, what do they mean by that? It could be a real jerk move, or maybe they just, having a bad day or whatever. But giving your spouse the benefit of the doubt, I think, is really important. A lot of times we just don't do that. But having the ability to communicate and being able to be vulnerable, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, my wife and I still have a long way to go on this, to be able to open up and talk about struggles. One of the things that happened to me in my journey is, my wife and I, we were married less than a month, and I opened up to her about something I was struggling with. And, we had a very, very, very bad fight about it. And it's something I can continue to struggle with for the next 20 some years, but I did not dare bring that up to her because I knew what had happened the last time, and that was my fault. But in some ways she was, again, because I think this stuff doesn't get talked about, she was not prepared to hear some of that stuff. And so I just didn't communicate with her for so long. And finally, Joan and I started talking. I was like, well, if I can't help myself, I'm going to help other people. So we're going to start talking about it. But what ended up happening then is, so he and I would talk, and then Jonah would go back, and his wife would say, what would you guys talk about? And he would like, well, we talk about this. And then you could talk about it within the context of, well, this is what Craig's going through. It wasn't, well, this is what I feel. This is, and it opened some doors for communication to them. And so that's one of the reasons why we do the podcast is I want to this is what I share the warts and all, because that may be an opportunity for someone that has difficult time talking to their spouse. Hey, let me tell you about what these clowns talked about. And it can break the ice for couples to talk about these things that can be embarrassing and whatever. And so that's why I think it's communication is always important. But I think especially for Catholics, where we have moral things that we need to contend with that a lot of people don't ever think about, the communication becomes all the more important.
Does your wife watch the podcast?
No. she's been on it a couple of times.
Yeah.
And she's even recommended the podcast to some other people. So I think it's a combination of not having time, and I think part of it she'd rather not know what we talk about. So no, we don't. It's weird, you know. I talk about stuff on here that the world hears that my wife doesn't hear, but that's okay.
Wow. Well, you know, we're almost at 45 minutes, so this has been a great experience, and of course, I don't watch the podcast as much. I catch it on Spotify because I listen as I'm doing other things. So when it pops on Spotify or one of the others, that I'll listen to it. And I'm waiting for your latest to drop on Spotify.
We had a fun one this morning. We were talking about something that came up in the Discord community. So it's we get up every Wednesday morning at 5 a.m. and we come in and record. And
really?
we've only missed it once. We've only missed 1 week when I was so sick I couldn't talk. Otherwise, we haven't missed a week.
Wow, that's great. That's dedication and everything else. Well, I want to thank you for being a guest on our program, and let people, and I'll be letting people know Uncharted Catholic Man, and they can contact you about the Discord and everything else. And great. Well, thank you for being a part of it.
Thank you, Father, for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share some of these things, and I'd be happy to come on anytime if you want me to.
Well, again, that was Craig Onan from Uncharted Catholic Man. If you want to tune into the podcast, you can find it on various podcast platforms, but they actually do, the original version is on YouTube. So you can go to youtube.com/@Uncharted Catholic Man, all one word. Do keep in mind they talk about very mature subjects. They're real world subjects, but very mature subjects. So this is not for family listening. I'll put it to you that way. They also have a Discord server. You can contact Craig. You can find all the information there on how to do that. You can contact Craig through the Discord server and join up on Discord in the further discussions and asking things and everything else. So again, it's Uncharted Catholic Man, and you will enjoy that, and I'm sure you will enjoy that if you want to check that out. Next week on the podcast, we're looking at the third week of Advent, and so we've got a whole bunch of readings. We're not going to be dealing with Isaiah anymore. We're going to be in Zephaniah. We're going to be in Numbers. We're going to be in Genesis. Then we also hit the O antiphons beginning on the 17th, and that's a whole different set of readings, and that goes 17th to 25th when we go right into Easter. But in any case, that all starts Monday, which I hope you tune in to us Monday. In the meantime, have yourself a blessed day, and we will see you Monday. The Catholic teaching in this podcast is reflected and presented as accurately as possible. The opinions expressed are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Archdiocese of Boston or any other institution.